Knowing what items do in Overlord definitely helps to understand what's going on, and since it's the third video on the topic, you already know what to expect. Hello Comrade, my name is Bahis. Come, get yourself a beverage and sit down with me. We got another batch of stuff to explain. Let's have a bit of a poetic start, describing an item that describes other items. Peroncino's encyclopedia, that Shaltir so proudly owns, is simply a game manual that helps new players understand the basic functions of the game, as well as stores lore about places, characters and monsters. When you encounter a new something, the encyclopedia or the journal automatically records the primary information of whatever was discovered, like name, appearance, locations, obvious stats, and some exposition. You could add extra information yourself to turn it into a bestiary of sorts, but it's a bit tedious as you have to discover the nitty-gritty yourself and type it all down. It's a cool idea in theory, and some of our games provide such an option, though the last time I used this kind of system was back in the OG Deus Ex. Here, the only reason to use it as a notebook is the lack of the Alt-Tab to Google option given the full dive technology, which makes the fact that Peroncino wiped half of the encyclopedia before giving it to Momonga very strange, yet considering who wrote all that info, maybe it's something akin to clearing your browsing history. Another piece of writing that should not be seen by anyone are Ainsama's personal notebooks. We saw or heard about them several times throughout the show, and it's just a collection of observations, gestures, phrases, pretty much anything that the Supreme Overlord thought would help him to be a better ruler. The interesting part is that he came up with all of them himself, but somehow it seems to be working. Everyone, both inside and outside Nazarick, are buying it like Misaka buys Gikota, further proving that Suzuki has a good combination of smarts and creativity. Also, it's amusing to see that in the anime, he gets more confident using the same bit over and over, like if you compare his first, very expressive "I demand silence" to its later, much more relaxed version in front of the dwarves. We are not done with the notebook yet, as there is a box in which they're stored. Unlike the personal subspace that is the item box, this one is a container called Magic Box, and you can probably deduce by the difference in terminology that the magic part of it means something other than the extension charm. An indiscriminate barrage of spells is what it is, triggered by an unsuccessful attempt at seeing what's inside by an unauthorized person. Curiously enough, the thief is not the primary target of the box's onslaught, since it's designed to destroy itself and its content when somebody tries to access it. Doesn't always work. A skilled rogue, 80 plus or above, with sufficient points in relevant job classes, can lockpick the magic box and take all the spoils. On the topic of making monies, we have a few items that play an important role in the local economy: sugar, spice, and everything nice. This might not feel like something worth mentioning, but that's where stories like Overlord, Slime, and some others go beyond your regular fantasy setting. They portray magic as an inseparable part of the world, the effects of which are noticeable in every aspect of the daily routine to some extent. Take the spice trade. Back in the day, it was one of the most expensive commodities, with saffron still being ridiculously pricey. If you could snap your fingers and make a pile of it once or twice a day, you'd be living pretty well now, let alone in the Middle Ages. Endry even encourages her husband to learn how to make sugar, since for some reason honey, that was a very accessible sweetener back in the day, is not on the menu. Spice magic appears to be common knowledge in the New World, right next to magically created / enchanted items for daily convenience. Renaer's teapot that keeps the beverage warm, for example. Not to be confused with commonly accessible, as there aren't many magic casters to begin with, and even fewer with the right know-how. Food enhancers are not the only products worth trading. Card Village is also known for its harvest of medicinal herbs, which I suspect are used in creating health potions. They make up the majority of their export, turning stinky plants into shiny coins that don't make a lot of sense. First and foremost, there are like 10 tons of discrepancy, only non-Americans will understand this pun, between the light novel and the web novel. Then there are prices versus the exposition, the issue with the lowest form of payment, so let's start with the exchange rates to get a baseline of what we are talking about. 1 platinum coin is worth 10 gold, 1 gold is 100 silver, and a silver is 13 copper. We know that a night's stay at the worst inn was 7 copper including basic food, extra copper for meat. The cheapest hotel, with a double bed and a breakfast I could find, was $70 at a moderate sized city, which makes 1 copper equal to roughly 10 bucks. I can understand meat, but what about buying a single apple or a box of matches? This in particular is not a criticism of the story. I genuinely don't know how this kind of stuff worked. But what I do know is that 1 silver is about $130, 1 gold is 13,000, and a platinum is 130,000. So far so good. However, Volume 7, Chapter 1 reads, 3 gold coins was enough for a plebeian family to live for a month. Assuming that's not eating Wagyu steaks nor cosplaying as Mickey at his lowest, that's 50 grand a month. So something isn't right with this conversion based on 2 things. How the money is spent and how it is earned. 1 copper buys a chunk of meat in your porridge or whatever they serve. 5 family members meet once a day, buy 30, that's 750 copper or 0.57 gold. Rounded up for all the extra stuff like veggies, divided by half because they buy in bulk for the whole family, and it leaves us with about 1/3 of a gold piece to eat really well by medieval standards. Rent is a tricky one, because depending on where you are, it will work differently. In the city, it's a flat rate, which started at 12.5% of income in the 14th century. I'm not a historian, so please correct me if I looked up the wrong information. Or a percentage of crops you grow if you are a farmer. Regardless, say 15% of 3 gold is 0.45. Add another quarter for beer and other beverages, maybe half for all sorts of maintenance, and we will have a grand total spending of 1.5 gold coin a month, stretching it. But what about earning it? 3 gold divided by 30. That's 10 silver a day for 1 parent, 5 silver for 2. Sounds like way too much, considering that the lowest rank adventurer pays only half a silver for accommodation a day and often has to share it with his fellows. They're supposed to be better paid than an average Joe, at least by a little bit, otherwise nobody would have been doing it. Britta had to starve herself to afford a potion worth a gold and some change to allow her to take a better paying quest. Why do that when you can go work a normal job and earn it safely, as 3 gold pieces will be way more than you need to live by yourself? Something just isn't right here, and it pisses me off that I can't put my finger on it. Next we have a much simpler item, Jugem's Magic Greatsword. Definitely something that suits a wielder with a lot of strength, as even carrying it around is troublesome. To compensate for that, it has an on-hit effect of weakening the opponent, similar to what Ainsama did to the Warrior King. Nowhere near the power level of course, but it's handy against weaker targets who are unlikely to resist it. Just like a lot of magical items, it also changes its size to fit the holder, though I'm interested in how it decides that these particular dimensions are good for this specific person. What if someone like Guts, who uses oversized weapons, picks it up? It probably adjusts until the user grips it tightly. On the topic of adjusting to the situation, we can't ignore the worker teams and the treasures they found. Not going to blame them for trying to go deep, but I will clarify any confusion you might have about the purpose of these little mausoleums. They were the icing on the cake. Imagine you play Skyrim or such and stumble upon ruins the outside of which have great loot. The only thought you might have is, if the loot here is so good, whatever's inside must be way more exciting. And it was, only not for workers. As soon as they stepped into the area around the entrance, they were already dead. And even if they tried to take this life-changing amount of gold back, Kokudos, who was tasked with dealing with any escapees, would have eliminated them with extreme prejudice. The caveat is that if Ainsama, his merciful majesty, saw that they weren't that greedy contrary to his previous experience, he would have granted them a quick death instead of the Lovecraftian horrors that most of them now have to endure. Not guaranteed by any means, yet that's what I choose to believe. Now, onto an item that got a lot of people, if not confused, but definitely puzzled. The collar, shackle, chain thing worn by the Lizardman and the Bone Daddy. It doesn't have a name, so it's simply called the collar, and it serves as an XP booster to level up faster in exchange for somehow encumbering or making the wearer weaker in the process. That's probably why Hamsuke was using it, so as to not put her in that much of a danger even if she was supposed to learn new abilities. Following that, there is other gear we saw for the first time. Ain-sama was feeling extra spicy that day to pull up in a bathrobe. Yet again, that's his home, so of course he will wear house clothes. That's a magically created item similar to Momon's armor and the equipment he used against Foresight, with the exception of rings, naturally. One of them is the detection blocking ring, and it has several effects in addition to what its name suggests. Mainly, it prevents any kind of divination related abilities from working on the wearer, which includes spells, scrolls, and even talents. Apparently, Shaltir is very annoyed by it because the ring doesn't allow her to spy on her beloved. Then it prevents people from discovering his job and racial levels. For instance, Evil Eye couldn't tell that he's a fellow undead despite the fact that she was falling under the Overlord's passive, which makes lower level undead have a degree of loyalty to him. Lastly, it completely erases the user's presence, which in case of Ain-sama can be felt without extrasensory means as stated by Robert Dyke. This is far from the only item that prevents various skills from working. The Bloody Emperor has a necklace that wards off mental attacks such as Demiurgus's mind control. Pretty impressive for a New World item, which is why Jerkniev keeps it hidden under his clothes and in general doesn't share information about this medallion with anyone else. I think this kind of gear is almost necessary for any person in power who lives in a magical world. Imagine somebody secretly using a charm person on a king to enter a favorable agreement or start major trouble. The Emperor does want to be exposed to this kind of danger, so he has Fluter, this necklace, and even a ring that detects poisons for an odd chance of someone spiking his drink. Alright, time to get into the closing part of the season and the few remaining curios. The cash shop item that I didn't talk about before, I think. The Hourglass. Its purpose is to reduce the cast time of a super tier spell to a 0, which otherwise can be pretty damn long, leaving you open for interruptions and other counterplay. Then there is Gazef in all his geared up glory. He wears 4 significant pieces of equipment, one of which we saw as early as Season 2. Razor Edge, a sword that, unlike most items in this world, was created through wild magic, the original supernatural force of the New World. It's largely believed that the Platinum Dragon Lord was its creator, who is known to give away this type of gear to people he deems worthy of protecting this world. As such, this weapon holds more power than it technically should and can even damage the likes of the Supreme One. How? By nullifying his low-level physical damage immunity as demonstrated by Ain-sama with a high-level dagger. Having said that, the Minion Authority also damaged their main character, but it didn't really help. The base attack of this sword is just too low to deal any noticeable harm to somebody with this much HP. Speaking of which, the next item from the head warrior's arsenal is the Amulet of Immortality, also known as the Amulet of Slight Regeneration. Yeah, I don't know who named it so, because all it does is provide a little continuous health regen and maybe a small heal once a day. Another item that gives him a buff, this time a more useful one, are the Gauntlets of Endurance. It's exactly what it sounds like, negating fatigue and granting the bearer endless stamina. Makes me immediately think of Climb. If you know, you know. Finally, we have the Guardian Armor. Aside from being made from adamantite, the hardest known metal that is ridiculously durable, its magical enhancement is rather underwhelming. It gives the wearer resistance to instant-death effects, which we haven't seen that many of. Only Ain-sama and Azus were shown to employ them, so I'm not sure how useful this resistance is. Also, it only provides this much defense since True Death was able to penetrate him no problem. Iwazai, Mahias, making it sexual at the wrong time. Have a great, whatever time of the day you have. Until next time, cheers.